all the other things I learned, all right, I need to get a business plan together. I need to do some research. I need to study the industry. I need to really narrow down what it's going to cost me and how long it'll take to build it up. I need to talk to others in the industry. And that was all things that I learned, like little by little. I mean, from all the other failed businesses, all of those taught me what I needed to do this one right.
As tough as those failed businesses or learning experiences, as I like to call them, can be, they're also blessings in disguise when we apply those lessons learned to our next venture. And that's exactly what today's guest has done. Hi there, and welcome. I'm Joan Posivy, host of the Side Hustle Hero podcast, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. Can you create a side hustle for yourself in the esports industry without being a skilled gamer? Today's guest, Titus Walker, discusses those opportunities. He's the creator and CEO of the UEL, the Ultimate Endgamers League. And according to Titus, it's a type of league that doesn't exist today anywhere else in the gaming world. He was building up this side hustle until his then employer gave him an ultimatum: ditch the hustle or lose your job. Titus wasn't about to ditch this baby. He describes what he's doing for esports to be like what the UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship, has done by pulling in the various martial arts. It's an interesting idea. Actually, it's more than an idea, as the UEL is now offering a $100,000 cash prize to the winning team of this season's tournament. What makes this league unique in the esports industry is that its success is not dependent on any one single game. If gaming is your world, perhaps you can see other side hustle opportunities emerging from this new league structure. If you do, let me know. I'd love to hear about them. But before that, I have a favor to ask. If you're enjoying what you're hearing in this podcast, I would be so grateful if you would take a moment and leave a 5-star review at the platform where you're listening to let others know that there's valuable content here to help them start or grow their side hustle. Thank you so much. Now here is my conversation with the founder and CEO of the Ultimate Endgamers League, Titus Walker. Well, welcome, Titus.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, given the growth of esports over the years, it being a worldwide billion-dollar industry, I've been really looking forward to featuring an episode about the side hustle opportunities available to a gamer or really anybody interested wanting to get into the industry.
Yeah.
And Titus, I think you're the perfect person to help us unpack those opportunities that aren't only available now, but what also you see going into the future. So tell us how you ended up being involved in esports in the first place.
A little bit of my backstory. I started in insurance sales. I did that for probably about 5 years, very successfully, and then transitioned into real estate. And I actually did a lot more like real estate development. So what we would do is we'd have, find a big plot of land, develop it or subdevelop it into sections, and then sell it off as a community, as an entire community, and then sell individual houses from there. And so I learned a lot about like business, but also how things are structured while doing that. I learned a lot about like the economy and finances and
in the back of your mind, building a community too. But
yeah, exactly. So it's like I've always enjoyed really studying and really learning about something, but also understanding how to pitch it, for lack of a better word, like to sell, and to really understand like the ins and outs of how people operate. I study body language a lot. That's like a big thing of mine where I'm trying to understand what people are thinking without what they say, because that's most of what you need to know. You get from how people interact with their body as opposed to just their words. And so studied that a lot while in the industry. So it was about 4 years ago, which was about 4 years into the industry. And actually in between, I had started and failed so many, and I say failed, but really just I learned a lot of, I had a lot of learning lessons along the way in trying to start stuff. And then that started, ended.
And those learning experiences do pile up to be able to finally hit something that's a real fit for you. And then you get to apply those learnings.
Yeah. And I tell you, like one of the hardest things is feeling like you've tried so many things and they just keep failing. Like it just keeps not going the way you intended, because I still don't think failure is the right word. I don't believe you can fail until you quit. But as I was going through the learning curves of trying different things, I started to recognize that I really needed to find something. So I was at the peak of my industry, made probably more money than most others in that same field.
You were an employee at this point?
Yes, I was an employee at this point. I was making well into the six figures.
Yeah.
Well into it. Though I was doing really well, I didn't feel like it was fulfilling my purpose.
Right.
The only time I really felt any purpose was when I was sitting down with potentially a couple that's looking to invest or looking to start a life with a new family or whatever. Then and they needed something, like they needed, their credit was really bad, or that's when I really felt any purpose. But other than that, it was just like boring. Like I could sell anyone, and so it got to the point where it was just repetitive. But at the same time, I felt like I knew that I studied the industry and learned like, okay, this is really cyclical. So it has ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
And so to go from, I don't know if any of the viewers have gone from making, we'll say anywhere between 200 and 500 a year to all of a sudden 60 or 50 or whatever. And that happened in that industry so often.
Right.
And those people would be ready to kill themselves at that point. I never found finances to be my identity, but it's still, I never wanted to be caught where I'm in an industry that I know is cyclical, and then all of a sudden it tanks and I'm stuck there kind of holding on,
right,
and hoping for a turnaround that could be 5 or 10 years down the road.
And that would have been because it was on a commission structure.
Yes, exactly. So it wasn't like a salary. It was based on how well I did, right?
And to your point too, that can happen in any industry. Well, I shouldn't say in any industry, but certainly when we're working for a company, a lot of those corporate decisions are out of our control as far as pivoting.
And it doesn't matter how great you are either. Like I said, I was at the top of the industry, and it doesn't matter, right? So that's why I started doing so many different things and trying to find something. Well, eventually I just bought like a virtual reality machine, and we were playing around with it. And my wife was like, you should start a business with this. And I've always loved video games. I mean, like my first video game I started playing when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
It was Mortal Kombat, which is a terrible video game for a 5-year-old, but I loved it. I got to compete with my father, and it was like, that was like the most enjoyable experience for me, was the competition inside of a video game. So when she said that, it kind of rang a bell in my head, like, oh, that's it. Like that's the one.
Yeah.
But at first I kind of like, this was like my 10th idea that year, and so it was like, why
is this one going to be any different than the others?
Yeah, exactly. So through all the other things I learned, all right, I need to get a business plan together. I need to do some research. I need to study the industry. I need to really narrow down what it's going to cost me and how long it'll take to build it up. I need to talk to others in the industry. And that was all things that I learned, like little by little. I mean, from all the other failed businesses, all of those taught me what I needed to do this one right. I needed to get the paperwork right.
This one being virtual reality?
No, esports, what I'm in now. Yeah. So virtual reality. Quickly, I didn't even start virtual reality before I got into the research and realized, okay, that's not going to work, but I still want to be in video games.
Right.
So I did all that research and started to realize, like, okay, there is a huge gap in this industry where esports currently is all centered around a single game. So every league out there, every single one of them focuses on one game, just one title. And I saw that as a problem, because I was like, well, if all of the games combined, the collective gaming industry is almost $250 billion. Esports is $1 billion.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, okay, where is gaming without competition? Right. Gaming is not really a thing without competition. And so why is there such a huge gap? 200 plus X larger is the gaming industry from the competitive gaming industry.
Okay.
Now, as I researched it, it became clear it's because the original esports blueprint, if you will, was created by a developer, and the developer is part of that 250, right? So the esports blueprint was built by the 250 billion, and everyone has just followed that blueprint. But that blueprint makes it so that the game wins because you build a community.
Yeah.
And if you think about real estate, right? If I was to build a massive mansion on someone else's land, it's still not mine. So it doesn't matter how big the mansion is. It could take up the whole plot of land. The person that owns the land owns what's important to that building. Because if they say, hey, you got to get off my land, I could move the house. Technically, you can move anything, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of effort.
The landowner being the game company.
Yes. The landowner is the developers of the game. The people that created it own the thing that matters, the thing that you build your entire community around, right? Is the game.
And so as a player, then you're picking your silo.
Yeah.
Like where you're going to compete.
Yeah. And the more research I did, so I worked with the University of Mary Washington business department, and they found that the average gamer plays 24 games. So that gave me even more of like, wait, so I would be literally just pigeonholing myself into one audience, one fan base, one title, and one developer, or I could find a way to build something that can speak to all gamers and combine them.
Okay.
And that was 4 years ago, the birth of UEL. And it's been great ever since.
So what was the business idea, and what does UEL stand for?
It's the Ultimate Endgamers League. So we created the term Endgamer, which it's a word that we own. And Endgamer is a master in the art form of gaming. And so as opposed to being one title specific, your focus is on gaming as a whole. And gamers know that, you know, if you're great at video games, there's people that can only play one, or maybe people that are just bad at video games, but there's a lot of people that are very talented at gaming as a whole.
Especially if you mention that the average person is playing 24 different games.
The average person. So that a year, 24 games a year. So it's like that changes, you know, over time. You've played hundreds and hundreds of games as an average gamer. And so what we started to do was build out, okay, what if our focus, instead of on any game, we focused on the art of gaming? The end gamer is the art, that's the master of the art form of gaming, right? We eliminate the game from our vocabulary and instead focus on the different genres, which there's 5 major genres in gaming. There's fighting games, there's sports games, there's shooting games, there's racing games, and then there's strategy games. And so those 5 games make up gaming as a whole. And there's subcategories, but the important thing is the genres, right? And so we created a sport that focused around the genre specific games instead of any one game. And so started to kind of pull different sports. I researched the NHL and how it was created, the NBA and how it was created, the NFL. So I started to think big and say, okay, end game, what is my end game? And how big could this thing really be? And immediately I'm like, this is an industry, right? Like we can literally build out our own industry. When you think of, and I grew up watching the UFC being built. I've like legitimately probably seen one fight in my entire life. I just don't watch sports. I was never into UFC as a sport. But I watched the industry being built. So I paid attention. I watched the tap out guys, and I watched like Dana White and how they moved. And I was always so interested in it. And so when I started building this, I took a lot from their book, because what they did is the same as this. They took all these different fighting genres and created the ultimate fighter, right? So jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, all of those different genres had their own thing, and they all kind of did well on their own. And there was really no need for the UFC at all, because all these different things already had their own thing, right? But somebody saw the vision to say, what if we found the ultimate and combined all these things? And a lot of people were like, no, let's not do that instead, you know, which is the kind of same pushback that I got at first. Until it started to catch on. And the second it caught on, it became this phenomenon that we know as UFC. It's the quickest sport out of all the other sports. All the other sports took 100 years to build. UFC was like 30 years old or 40 years old or something like that.
Right.
And it's one of the biggest sports of all time, right? And as social media grows, you can grow it a lot faster if you have the right tools. And the average sport has 200 to 400. So, you know, NBA has 400 million basketball players in the world. Football is like, I think 250 or something million football players. Gamers, there's 2.5 billion gamers. So there is a much larger audience than any other sport. Really, all the sports combined make up the gamers base. And the average gamer is playing 24 games, right? And there's no other league that does what we do. So it kind of makes it easy and very difficult at the same time.
Those are some pretty big numbers, Titus.
Yeah.
And no one else in the industry has been doing this.
Not a single person in the industry has thought to do this, tried to do this. It is just us.
That's crazy.
We own the concept of endgaming. We own the IP on how we do it. Like we put everything on like a roulette wheel. I like playing roulette. So I basically put all the different games that we play. It's 33 different titles, just like a roulette wheel has 33 slots, right?
Yep.
So it depends on the casino, and they all have different games that are mixed up in there that are all based on those genres. And so you have like 7 fighting games, 7 shooting games, 7 sports games, right? And they're all mixed up, and then the wheel spins and the 2 teams that are playing each other just play whatever comes up. So the game is really irrelevant, right? It matters as much as anything else, right? It really doesn't matter. What matters is the skill set of the players. And we've broken those skill sets down to where the game could message me right now and the developer could say, hey, you are not allowed to play my game, and which is happening. And I saw that coming 4 years ago for all these other big, huge brands that have built up their entire fan base on a game. Okay. The game is now coming and saying, hey, you can't play my game anymore, right? Or you can, but it's going to cost you, I want 80% of what you're making, right? Or because they can do what they want. It's their stuff, right?
Right.
And that's happening everywhere. All the games are now trying to do the esports themselves. Because if they can get the 1 billion plus the 250 billion, they're great. Now they're at 251, right? So it's like they're taking control of that. And it's the natural order. Like, of course that's going to happen. But until somebody fights back and says, look, they could call me right now and be like, hey, you can't play my game.
Right.
I don't care. Nor do any of my gamers. I have 400 plus pro gamers. None of them care because I remove games every season. So this game can go, this game can go. And I've made a point to them since season 1. We're on season 7 now, going on season 8. But since season 1, I've made a point to them that the game doesn't matter. I don't care how much you like it. I don't care how much you don't like it. If it fits in these genres, we're going to play it, right? And that control is what allows us, as we grow. Imagine if I have a base of 100,000 people that are loyal and playing the games because they want to win the prize, right? So they want to be number 1. Well, they have to play the games that are on the wheel.
Right.
And if I can guarantee a developer, a small developer or a large one, 100,000 gamers are going to play your game, what does that cost them, right? In order to do that. Instead of them coming to me and saying, hey, you got to pay me, I'm saying, no, you got to pay me.
Right.
Because I'm not putting you here until you do.
Yeah. Well, the winner of the decathlon in sports is considered the greatest athlete in the world.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's what you're training people to do with esports.
We have the greatest gamers in the world, period, point blank. Like we have played some of the best teams in the world with a combined, 17 different, one team we played had 17 different world championships across all kinds of different games. Mm-hmm. And we absolutely destroyed them. Absolutely, like not a chance. No way. Wow. Yeah, we have the best gamers on the planet.
Let's back up your story a little bit. So you got this idea. What was the business model? What was happening at this physical space that you needed, as opposed to people gaming online?
The thing was, I never really wanted it to be online. That was the only real, we could have done almost everything online.
Okay.
But there's something about online gaming that just didn't appeal to me. And I knew if I started it online that it would become an online thing. And I've been laser focused this entire time, right? Because I knew what the end goal was. I haven't let a single person talk me out of what I see. And I think that's been key to this is there's nobody that has been able to convince me otherwise. And everyone's tried from everyone, right? So
even your wife?
Even my wife. But nobody has been able to convince me. And this is honestly the first time in my life that I can say that's true. The first time in my life that I've been unmovable, because I've always been the guy that takes care of everyone else first. And always been the guy that's just, giving, I'll give away my house if somebody needs it. I'll give, I had multiple family members living with me for years on end with no rent and friends. And, I've just always been that guy.
Yeah.
So for the first time in my life, it was I knew something so much and so deeply that you could not move me. So it was like, I'm not doing this online. I know we could do it online. I know it could probably be successful online. I've had tons of like investors and people like, just do it online, throwing, wanting to and it's nope, not interested. And that's kind of been a consistent thing for me. Like, it's not to the point where I'm stubborn. It's more to the point where if it doesn't fit in the vision that I have, I will not do it.
You're not interested in it. Yeah.
Not interested. And so like for a while this is a great example, for a while at the venue, we were doing, birthday parties and making a lot of money doing birthday parties. Cause it's like, it's a nice venue. We can charge over 200 plus an hour. Like, and that's just for one part of it. And so we eventually, that's just kind of fast forwarding, but we had a board and they're all like, yeah, just do birthday parties and we'll be able to make money on the side. And I was, no, not doing it. We're shutting that down. I don't care how successful it is. I don't want to become a birthday party place. And the fact that I'm not willing to give someone a half-ass birthday party because I wouldn't want that. And I'm not willing to say, hey, you have to go because we've got more important things going on. And so, we're going to have to cut this short. I'm not willing to do any of that. So Therefore, I'm only going to focus on this league stuff. So we ended up shutting down all the arcade operations, all of the birthday parties. And now it's just for the league. The league practices there and the league plays there. We do all of our shows there. But at first, that was a very tough hurdle to cross, and one that, a lot of people didn't agree with.
Yeah. You've signed a lease. You've got lots of expenses. What are the revenue sources?
So we have quite a few. So each team in the league is owned by an investor. And so we have like a cybersecurity company that owns, which is an example, we have a cybersecurity company that owns a team. They're a business that's making hundreds of millions of dollars and they invest in almost like an NFL, NBA team, right? So they're a part of it. We have Gracie's Jiu-Jitsu, which is one of their owners for one of their locations, also owns another team. And so team sales is one source. It's not the larger source, but it is a source. Then you have the like merchandising and stuff like that. So we sell like jerseys, and we have a really good deal from when I was a kid. Actually, we're not going to go into that, but I started doing like shirts and sneakers and stuff. And so I ended up meeting factory owners and stuff in China that now supply me with all this stuff for like very, very low prices.
Right. So you got a nice markup there.
Exactly. Merchandising, the wheel itself. So remember I said, the wheel as it spins, what games come on. So every season we change that.
Yes.
Sponsors, advertising. We get so in a normal week, we're looking at probably around almost 15 to 20,000 viewers. So advertisers like to see that kind of stuff for marketing, advertising, that type of stuff.
Sure.
The final one, which eventually will be one of the major ones, but for now it's a much smaller portion. So we have 4 different locations. And the main location is where we host all of the events, but the other locations run like normal arcades. And so when they're collecting revenue for things, so we do like tryouts because we have a draft every season, like the NBA and NFL, right?
Okay.
And so when people are trying to join the league, they have to compete in a certain amount of tournaments and win. And then we collect a percentage of those fees for people that are registering. Yep, exactly. And so that's another form. And it's pretty easy to expand because the hole that I mentioned before in the market, where a lot of the I would say probably 90% of the arcades that were created, as I did my research, are suffering. They're failing as far as a competitive scene goes. They want to be competitive and they want to have a competitive scene, but it turns into just a birthday party venue because that's really where they get most of their money. And so what I've been able to do for them is provide, so season 7, we're doing $100,000 tournament. So now they get to market $100,000 tournament that they're doing the entries for, right? That they're doing the qualifiers for.
Who's they?
The other locations.
Ah, okay.
One of the places, it's called the Outer Limit. So it's not necessarily, I didn't buy it. I didn't spend the money on it. I don't pay the rent at that location.
Right.
But they are a UEL hub that hosts the tournaments, and then I collect a percentage of it, right? And so I don't have the overhead. I just have the profit margin. And for them, they now, instead of doing a tournament and not being able to say what the prize money is, which is normal, or it's like $100 or whatever, and you get 2 people to show up, you can say, I'm doing $100,000 tournament for the qualifiers at the UEL, right? They become kind of marketers for us, and become a revenue source, right? So eventually the goal, as we continue to meet with people, right now we're in talks with MGM in Vegas and Dave and Buster's to try and get like bigger deals where we can get into multiple locations all at once and then be able to provide qualifiers right then and there at all those locations and collect a revenue stream. So
nice. So where's the 100,000 coming from for the prize money?
it comes from all the things I mentioned: the wheel, team sales, sponsors, and then some from my pocket. So over the years, this is probably the first one that I won't have to fund. Okay, which is great.
Yeah. And do the gamers, esports athletes, pay to get into the competition?
No. So once they become pros and they get drafted to a team, they no longer pay anything at all.
Okay. So up until then, they might be spending money at these locations in order to basically play and practice.
Yep.
Okay. So then once they turn pro, are they subsidized by the team owners?
Yes. So once they make it to the pros, then if the team, let's say a team wins the $100,000 prize, the team owner collects a percentage of that. Okay. And then the players are all under contract for a percentage as well. And so they have X, percent based on their skill level, or, because some players are collecting a bigger percentage than others depending on what they're at.
Right. So you're not working for the land developers anymore?
No. So about a year ago, a year in July, so over a year ago, the business was doing really well and it just started to take off. And they caught wind of it and basically came to me with an ultimatum and said, either you shut it down in a week or you're fired. And I was like, okay, well, I'll see you guys later. And
really?
That was that. Yep.
What was their objection to you running it? Doesn't sound like there would be a conflict, or it was just taking up too much of your time.
There was no objection that was legitimate. They didn't even have an objection. They just said that they didn't want me to own anything outside of, because it didn't take up any of the time. I was still at the top, still selling higher than anybody else.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say what it was, but I'd say it had nothing to do with the business. I would say it would be my guess, because everything else was going well. Right. And then one day they just out of the blue decided, and I told them about the business prior to starting it. Mm-hmm. So they knew for the past, 2-3 years that it was going on, and then just kind of cut the cord. So
you were working on it for 2-3 years before you were actually didn't have that regular income anymore.
Right. So it helped because it allowed me to have a lot more freedom, a lot more focus on what I was doing. And once I decided that, it's kind of just taken off from there. Like the week, that was like a pretty tough time because we didn't really have much. I always say the first 3 years, everyone told me I was doing it wrong. Like everybody I met, everybody I spoke with was just like, hey, just do it the regular way. Like, why don't you just do a normal tournament? People that were entering the tournament, the pros that played in the tournaments, that was really tough because people hadn't started telling me yes yet, but the job was coming to me and saying, if you don't stop this. But there was just never a question in my mind, never a question. Again, I was literally immovable. I called my wife and I'm like, so you're not going to like this, don't panic. But my job called and they said that I have a week to shut down the UEL. And she was like, well, you're not going to do that. And I was like, yeah, well, nice. You already know. And she supported me in the decision. So, but it wasn't easy for either one of us because it was like, okay, now we know. And again, she was stay-at-home mom. She's now in dentistry, which she loves. But yeah, she was stay-at-home mom. And then, so it was like a transition where I was going into this full force and it was everything, though it had none of the things that we have going for it now, didn't have at that time. So probably like a month after the decision, we had been contacted by ROC Nation, which is Jay-Z's company, and they wanted to work with us to help create a global presence. So we're doing a lot in Africa and stuff like that with them. Shortly after that, we were contacted by the New Orleans Pelicans and, the Washington Commanders. And, so it was like that moment. It wasn't difficult, but it was hard. I don't know if that makes sense. It was hard to go through. But it wasn't a difficult decision to make. Yeah. And I felt a lot of comfort in making it because I was like, okay, this is do or die now. Like,
yeah, it's like I burned the ships. Now I'm all in. There's only going forward.
Yes. And I've never looked back. Like, don't even really think about it anymore, unless I'm, being interviewed or anything like that. So the best decision I ever made.
Yeah. Awesome. That is such a brilliant example of when something happens in the moment, too often we can judge it as something terrible, but it's only in retrospect when we can look back and say, you know what, I'm glad that happened because now I'm doing this. It pushed me to. But it sounded like from the beginning you were set at pursuing this forward anyway.
Yeah, I was. And there were times, that I felt like I don't want to give this baby up for an adoption or something, but it was like, it was really tough.
Yeah.
And there was a quote that I read in a book. It was the Innovator's Dilemma. I read a lot. And in the book, it said, Henry Ford said that if he would have asked what the customers wanted, they would have told him they wanted a faster horse.
Yes.
And it's like that quote would just play in my head over and over. Like, they don't know what they want. They don't know what they need because they haven't seen it yet.
They can't see what's in your head.
You have to show them. And I knew if I didn't, somebody else would. But nothing is your idea. It's all like floating. You know what I mean? And people are receiving it and doing something with it or not. And so I'm blessed to say and thankful to say that, I got the idea and ran with it and haven't looked back.
One of my very first interviews I did for the podcast, the guest, the side hustle hero, talked about that in the sense that she said, I feel like an idea drops on your lap and you've got the choice to run with it or not. If you don't, it'll go on to someone else.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
And the other thing was your story reminded me of that cute story about the statue of David and Michelangelo. For months and months, years, the master Michelangelo goes and he's chipping away at this thing. And there's this little boy that comes and watches him every day. And then finally, when the artist was finished and the statue of David was there for all to see, the little boy looks up in amazement and says to Michelangelo, how did you know that he was in there? So nobody else walking by all the time had the image of what it was going to be. Similarly, you've got this idea in your mind and you're working away at chipping away, putting the pieces together actually to create it for the rest of the world to see.
That's a really good story for that, because that's exactly what it feels like. It just feels like everybody else just sees a big block. And it's sometimes it just digs at you to try to like get someone to visualize. And in the beginning, I tried to convince everybody. And then I realized, like, over time, it was like, all right, I'm not even going to try anymore. Like either you're going to see it or you don't.
The thing that people didn't understand or didn't agree with sounds like two things. One, having esports competition where you're really focusing on the players' skills versus them just playing one game. And then the second piece is not doing this online, but rather having a physical gathering of people. Is that?
Yes.
Was that the issue? Yep. Okay.
Yeah. And the third piece was not focusing on money, not making it like where it's like, you've got to get money right now. You've got to like charge these players to stay in the league and stuff like that. Like all of that has, like, we've been able to grow at a pace that we couldn't have. And we shouldn't have, in my opinion, grown at the pace we're at now, except by making it like this. Like when you joined the NBA and the NFL and, even way back in the day, you weren't paying to play in this professional sport. Either you were a professional or you weren't, right?
Right. Yeah.
And every bit of money that comes in that isn't spent on marketing, on advertising, it's going to be put back into the players. It's going to be put back into finding, sponsors and getting the players to where they're comfortable just doing this, because that's when we'll really see the sport elevated. Once the players can just do this and they can really demonstrate the art of gaming. And what we do is more inclusive, but also it's more fun for the players and it promotes diversity. There isn't really a sport that promotes diversity the way we do, because historically fighting gameplay, or we'll say strategy game players and sports game players, can never get along. They will never mix. It doesn't work. You're not going to get them all in the same room. Like normally, if they're having conventions, they're at two different conventions because they're not going to be mixed up. They're not the same types of people. until they have to depend on each other to teach each other the skills in the different games. So we have players that would have never met, that would have never hung out, that love each other. They've become best friends in learning each other's skills and understanding and appreciating each other's strengths and weaknesses. Nice. Because now they're not just accepting of each other. They're full blown teaching and really like loving each other to the point where they're helping someone that they normally would never even interact with or get along with in learning their style, their art, their game, their genre, right?
Nice. There's another aspect of you that I think is the savvy marketer, because you mentioned the wheel and the 33 games, and I understand some of that is through sponsorship, but then some of those game slots, you reach out to your community to say, what do you want us to have on the board? Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, to really make it interesting and see like new games that people love. And, you know, if I see there's 100 people that send me the same new game that I didn't know about, I try and like, if it works, then, you know, I put it on and, you know, they love it.
It's always going to keep the league fresh and up to date too, because these players are going to be bringing you games to check out and consider.
Absolutely. Yep. The new and up and coming games, as opposed to the small developers that are, you know, trying to work their way up and need a community of gamers to help.
Yeah. And the sponsorship, are they typically dollars, like a traditional sponsor of a convention?
Yeah. So like advertising dollars plus normally like we've got like a chair sponsor. So advertising dollars plus the chairs for the arena and headsets and controllers and that type of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, nice. And I was going to ask you about who is your demographic, who ends up showing up in the esports lounge, who's wanting to become a competitor in the UEL?
Age demographic is normally between like 25 and 35. But we have some players that are 12.
Okay. Yeah.
And we have some older players that are, you know, 40, 50. Really? So it ranges. It's a big range. And we have people that travel from California and Vegas and New York every week to come out and play. What we do is very cool, and we have a lot of the culture. So we do have probably about 60 to 65% African American as well, which is great.
And mostly or all male?
No.
Mostly
is, but all definitely not. So we probably have at this point is at least one female on every team, and that's growing pretty rapidly.
Nice. Well, you're clearly passionate about community. What's the size of your community now, like social as well as members, fans of the UEL?
So we are social-wise, we're well over 10,000. With our gamers, we have about 400, including like free agents. So there's about 200 that are on teams. And then we have free agency pool as well of players that, you know, are looking to make a team. And so they may be on like a practice team or whatever.
Okay.
And then we have easily 40 or 50 people that are helping with productions and contractors and stuff like that. So
yeah. And some of them, I would imagine that would be a trade as well. Like you come give us a hand for that. And in turn, we'll do this for you or provide this training or.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's fair. So Titus, what do you attribute the growth of the UEL towards? Why is it growing?
I think it's growing because it fits a need that the community really desires that they don't even know about. So it's like, you know, when a person walks through the door and plays, they're hooked. You know, when a person watches and understands, they're hooked. Like, because it's just so interesting and it's a beautiful chaos, like the UFC. You know what I mean? It's just a beautiful chaos.
Yeah. Well, what opportunities are out there for someone wanting to start a side hustle in the esports industry?
I would say with us, even we have team owner, we have coaching, training. And then if you're looking to get and start your own business, it's tough out there in esports right now, because unless you're like most times you're trying to create a league with one game in mind. And I don't recommend that for anybody right now. You can see there's only really one way that goes. If esports stays on the trajectory it's on, and all of these, let's say there's 10 different gaming leagues worth $1 billion, and every gaming league focuses on a game, when does the 250 billion swallow up that 10? Because they own the games, right? When does that happen, right? And the answer, it happens right away. The second that they get big enough, the game comes in and takes over. It's happened with Super Smash Brothers, Call of Duty, NBA 2K, Madden, Valorant. You can name the game, and it's happening right now. These leagues that have been built up, they've hired employees, they've got so much of this overhead, and they've done it all online too. So you would think that would be the easy part, but no, like it's not theirs. So the community really doesn't matter. And then, you know, once that's taken from them, their options are to transition, and they're going to lose a lot of their community because maybe they don't play those games.
Right.
So I'd say if there's any recommendation, it's don't go out there and try and spend money on a single title.
Okay.
And yeah, come work with me. If you want to get into esports, I'm your guy.
Yeah, but they've got to be geographically in your neighborhood, no?
We're working with Michigan State, New Orleans. Like, there's many ways that you can get involved with my organization elsewhere, because we make it simple. Like, again, you don't have to find a community of people that play Call of Duty. You just find a community of gamers, and they're everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have something for them because of what we offer.
So how would somebody, say, on the West Coast, whether that be Canada, the US, or even overseas, work with you? So
they would find a local spot near them that they can manage and start to build up a community of UEL gamers. And so essentially the easiest thing that we can do is, I'm already providing the $100,000. You build up a community over there, you hold qualifications, you build up a team, and then come play us. You create your team and your organization and continue to build it, and then come out and play against us, because the competition is very welcome. And then winner gets the prize money, so that if your team wins.
So if I was starting that side hustle, then that would be finding the property, creating the space for these gamers to come.
Potentially. Most of the spaces already exist.
Right.
So you just find a space that's like, you can go to a local arcade or a local Dave & Buster's and say, hey, I've got this great idea. You know, I'd be willing to manage it. This is what I have. This is the company that's doing it. I want to host competitions here. They already have the location. They're already paying. They're footing the bill anyways.
Yeah.
You give them a percentage.
And so if this was my side hustle I was starting then, I would be charging essentially the players to be part of this.
Yep, exactly.
And if I'm good at some of these things, offering the coaching and training.
Yep.
So it would be a way for someone that's really into gaming to create essentially a coaching and training center almost at these arcades.
Yes. Or a umbrella or hub of the UEL that kind of builds up on its own.
Right.
And a West Coast division.
Almost like a franchise then, so that
exactly like franchise.
Person starting the side hustle business, at what point and in what form would I be paying the UEL?
So all of our franchises, we collect 30% of the revenues.
Okay. And that would be revenues of?
The profits.
Of what?
The entry fees.
Okay. All right. Entry fees. Got it.
Yep. So
think this through, what the revenue sources is. So the revenue sources for me starting the business is what I'm going to be charging to basically teach, train, and coach.
Yep. And qualify them for the tournament.
Right. And then there's per person tournament fee.
Yeah, when they pay to qualify. So let's say they come in and they want to play. You can say, oh, you have to win 10 tournaments to make the team, right? So then that person pays you, the $20 10 times.
Got it. Okay. So it's a matter of doing the math and how big it needs to be in order to make it worthwhile for the person.
Yep.
Because it's going to take some time for them to grow that.
Yes.
Again, depending on their connections and what they've got going right now.
Yeah. And I mean, you could spend $100 in marketing right now on Instagram and you're going to get it in front of thousands of people.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah.
You do the right marketing and there's nothing in that area that is like this, which I can promise you there isn't, then you're going to get the right people.
Well, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, Titus?
You can contact us through UEL Esports on all platforms. So it's at UEL Esports. And then UELesports.com is our website.
Great.
And you can contact Olivia at info@UEL Esports. She's our assistant. She's amazing. And awesome. If you have any questions or Whatever. Yeah, you can hit us up there.
And we'll make sure those links are in the show notes.
Perfect.
So what's your best tip to inspire others, Titus, to start and grow their side hustle dream?
So I would say to anybody wanting to start a side hustle, in my real estate years, did hundreds of millions in revenue and made millions of dollars over that period of time. It does not compare to doing my own thing. It really doesn't. Like, I would much rather be broke doing this than be rich doing that. And I would have never thought that I could be so like passionate about something that is not a person, you know? But for the first time in my life, this is something that I would die for. And if I didn't have that and I was just working and I never really took the chance, who knows where I would be or how I would feel, but I know I wouldn't feel like this and I wouldn't be like this. And so if you're thinking about doing it or you want to do it, do it. You live one time and it is totally worth it to just step out of your comfort zone and learn.
What do you think the why is behind your drive to create this?
My dream in life has always been two things. One, to be a great father, and two, to create opportunities for others. I've never been able to capture what that looks like. So I've always said that, but it's been empty. It's been like this, like, I just want to create opportunities for others. And I didn't know what that looked like. I couldn't put a picture around it, like the sculpture.
Yeah.
I just couldn't tell what that looked like. But the second that I started doing this, I realized what it looked like. I realized what it was. And
it gave you the vehicle to do that.
It gave me the drive. And I like I said, I haven't looked back.
So for season 7, then, what kind of numbers are you looking at as far as participation?
Season 7, we have over 5,000 to 10,000 viewers per match. We have over 200 active gamers competing on a daily basis.
Nice.
And yeah, and it's $100,000. So
look at that growth, right?
Yeah.
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 Well, thank you so much, Titus, for sharing the UEL story, your insights into the esports industry and potential opportunities there. And of course, for being today's side hustle hero.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Titus was inspired by what he saw the UFC doing and applied it to create something entirely new for the esports industry. While it's not likely that my future will involve esports, but then again, never say never, I really appreciate his story. He's taken a concept that's worked well somewhere else and applied it to something that he's passionate about. Sometimes the best ideas to help our side hustle along come from outside our industry. And I applaud his tenacity. He said that many of his business ideas did not work out. So many times he could have given up. But he kept trying new things until he discovered an idea that really resonated with him at the intersection of gaming and esports and business. I don't know how big a success or not the UEL will become, but I do know that because of all those learning experiences that Titus has gone through in the past, he's in a much stronger position today to apply those lessons learned to give the UEL its best shot at being the phenomenal success he envisions it to be. Those learning experiences, when they happen, can be tough to take. But if we're willing to look at them as such, they don't have to stop us. In fact, they can help you move forward into the future smarter, wiser, better prepared to handle challenges, to give your side hustle the best shot of being the phenomenal success you envision it to be. And I can assure you, the confidence that that builds over the years makes the journey that much more fun. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find the links to the UEL that Titus mentioned at our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know you're listening and tell me how this podcast is helping you. What areas could we do better? You can tag me or send a DM on Instagram at Joan Posivy. Thanks for listening and hustle on.